The Electoral College of the United States exists for the American Republic was not created by the people. The American Republic was created by the states who signed on to the U.S. Constitution. The states, as sovereign nations, gave some of that sovereignty up to join the federal union. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and one other that I'm forgetting. Stupid me. I had to do this, so you have my ignorance. You can add in the comments, it won't count as your comment, what of the 13 colonies I just forgot. Maine didn't exist because it was a colony of Massachusetts. Vermont didn't exist at first because it was sort of a disputed territory between New York and New Hampshire. Well, Maryland! 13! My mind is still, well, kind of dull and slow, but eventually I got there. So, 13 colonies fight together against the British for our independence. They come together in the Continental Congress. Then the Articles of Confederation are used as a way of coordinating activities between these 13 states, but it doesn't work. So a new constitutional convention is joined. These states get the decision to join or not to join. And the states then go to their own people and vote. But each state makes the decision to join. The states are intended to be, as part of our federal system, very important parts of our government, between the federal government and the local governments. The state governments are to provide a variety of different approaches to freedom. Each of the states is a laboratory of democracy. You're going to have states that are very progressive and liberal. You're going to have other states that are very conservative and Republican. And these states are all different. They all have to be coordinated and harmonized to a limited degree to function within the federal union, but the states are supposed to be different. The states used to have the job of selecting senators. Senators were not elected by the people. They were elected by state legislatures. Why? Because the House of Representatives in the federal government's legislative branch were supposed to represent the people of each state. The Senate was supposed to represent the governors and the government of each state. Now that's gone. We started popularly electing senators over 100 years ago in most places. But the Electoral College remains as an important reality that it is the states, not the mass of the American people, but the states that elect the president. Within each state, there are voting processes that determine, for example, who Idaho's electors should vote for, who California's electors should vote for. Now, throughout most of our history, the states were monoliths. In other words, all California representatives voted the way the entire state voted. Democrat and Republican regions voted for whoever got the majority among all Californians. The same was true for Idaho, the same was true for Maine, for Connecticut, for New York, for Maryland. And that meant that within each state you had your own little mini presidential election. We've got 50 of them now. Because of the way we assess congressional districts, there are inconsistencies. So that if you have massive populations in places like California or New York, Texas, or Florida, you might actually have a case in a very close election where the majority of the popular votes, by a fairly small number, go to one person. But the majority of electoral votes, state-by-state contests, go to another. Now, in recent times, several states have decided to allow their votes to split along congressional districts. Idaho has 2 congressional districts right now, so the Northern District of Idaho and the Southern and Eastern District of Idaho might each get separate orders from their people. But I think that Idaho still allows the state to all come as one unit. Where I used to live in Maine, it had been that way, but then they changed it to allow their 2 congressional districts to go their own ways. And there were times when the 2nd district in Maine, the northern area of Maine, voted Republican, whereas the southern district on the coast voted Democrat. What does all this mean? The Electoral College is a representation of state power. As such, each state makes the rules on how the electors operate. But there's a secret. Above and beyond anything else, the electors can vote for whoever they want. They don't have to vote the way their state chooses. They should vote the way their state chooses. They should follow the rules. They should, and many states have tried to make laws that compel electors to vote for whoever gets the popular vote within their state, or, and this is something that California is flirting with, whoever gets the popular vote nationally. But those laws are of questionable constitutionality because our founders set up the Electoral College to be a fail-safe, like a circuit breaker in your house. If there's a lightning strike nearby and there's a power surge through the lines, the job of the circuit box in your house is to flip and disconnect your house's electricity from the lines as the power surge comes in. The power surge hits the circuit breakers, and the circuit breakers all disconnect from the power, hopefully before all of your electronics at home are going to be burned out and destroyed. That's the point of having a circuit breaker. Our founders understood something. Sometimes free people become panicked. Sometimes they become stampeded. And stampeded, panicked people usually make incredibly stupid and self-destructive decisions. If people are faced with a sudden existential crisis that calls into question the very survival of themselves, their families, their society, they might reach for what seems like a solution. But that solution could be a cure that's worse than the disease. It could be a solution that may protect or seem to protect life at the expense of our freedoms, at the cost of our liberties. And one should never trade freedom for an illusion of security. Our founders understood that sometimes democracy can go wrong. It happened in Australia in the 1970s. There was a weird election. This guy was elected, and the Queen of England and the British government refused to recognize the election. And most Australians were grateful because they looked in horror at what had just happened. So the system that they had in Australia allowed the Queen's government in Britain, which had to recognize a Prime Minister of Australia as part of the Commonwealth of Nations that Britain has, that was their circuit breaker, protecting the Australian people from a truly bad decision that they had made in an emotional moment. What if that happened here? What if suddenly the American people decided, because of coronavirus and economic depression, that the only way out was to elect a bunch of communists? Communists who would destroy the Constitution, because that's what communism does. Communism is essentially and basically incompatible with the United States Constitution. Look at what communists believe, look at what the Constitution says, and you'll see that I am not exaggerating one iota. If the American people elected a bunch of communists who had no care for the U.S. Constitution, it would be the end of the American Republic. But let's say a panicked, stampeded American population did that. One would hope at that moment that the Electoral College would do its intended job, which is to second guess the American people. Maybe instead of voting for the people that their states chose, maybe they would choose someone else. Maybe they would choose something else. Maybe they would choose, but they would be one of the last lines protecting America's freedoms from a group of politicians who have every intent to destroy those freedoms and get total power. The Electoral College is intended to be that circuit breaker. So here's a question for you in the comments section. Do you agree or disagree with the Electoral College being there as a circuit breaker to help protect the Republic from a stampeded, panicked electorate? Do you believe in the Electoral College as an earnest of the reality, as a demonstration of the reality that the states made the federal republic and not the people, and that the states matter? Do you agree or disagree with the Electoral College because without it, no presidential candidate would spend much time outside of New York and Los Angeles and the other major urban centers? If we suddenly became a giant amoeba where the most votes count within the entire country, there would never be a reason for a politician to go to Idaho. Never. Because Idaho simply has too few people to count. If it's about massive numbers of people, you go to the cities and you forget about the countryside. Or do you think that the Electoral College is something that betrays democracy by refusing to allow the person who got the most votes within the nation, not within the states, but within the nation, by refusing to allow them to become president? So I will expect here another big, thoughtful comment with a thesis, with some reasons, and with some evidence or some examples from the real world, or from examples that you could predict if your idea came true or not. What do you think of the Electoral College, and why? See you next time.